In April 2026, Su Lam officially stepped up to assume the roles of state president, party chief, and head of the military, consolidating complete control over Vietnam's government. Western media outlets reacted almost uniformly to the news. They labeled the shift as authoritarianism, called it democratic backsliding, and framed it as a copycat of Beijing. But veteran political observer Ho Pin argues these analysts are suffering from a 1980s hangover. They are trying to map a 2026 reality using an obsolete post-Cold War framework that expired decades ago. He poses a specific question. Do we evaluate a political system by whether it matches Western democratic aesthetics, or by its measurable ability to improve the daily lives of its citizens? Labeling this consolidation a simple step backward completely ignores the reality on the ground. Vietnam is deliberately trying to escape the institutional paralysis of its previous government model. After the Cold War ended, the West wrote a standard prescription for developing nations, a combination of economic shock therapy and Western-style democracy. You can look at 1990s Russia to see the result. State assets were sold off to oligarchs for pennies, and the nation's GDP was cut in half over the decade. The pattern repeated in the Balkans. Forced democratization led directly to hollowed-out economies, severe population drain, and structural poverty that persists today. East Asia chose a different route. Nations like China and Vietnam prioritized centralized political stability, driving decades of explosive industrial growth. The divided power model carries a massive human and economic cost. It is often glossed over in Western political theory, but it is recorded clearly in the historical data. For years, Vietnam operated on a 5-pillar system. It was a collective leadership structure designed specifically to prevent any single dictator from taking hold. But divided power created divided responsibility. Because policy decisions required endless factional bargaining, the system fell directly into institutional paralysis. For a rapidly developing nation needing to execute complex reforms, this gridlock is an existential threat. The country simply cannot afford to stall. Su Lam's consolidation of the top 3 government roles functions as a structural correction. As a former public security chief, he needed a steady hand to wield the scalpel in the country's severe, uncompromising anti-corruption purge. Without a unified authoritative core, anti-corruption efforts devolve into factional warfare. Centralizing power is the only way to cut through entrenched interests and cure administrative rot. Walk through the streets of Saigon today, and the atmosphere feels energetic and unconstrained. Young people crowd into sidewalk cafes, motorbikes weave through traffic, and there is a raw sense of social vitality. This energy flows alongside a hardline political core. Unlike its neighbors, Vietnam's social sphere remains remarkably open. Global information moves through local smartphones without the interference of a national firewall. That social openness powers an economic engine that is currently the fastest-growing manufacturing hub in Southeast Asia. Vietnam balances hardline politics with a flexible society, a survival strategy refined over centuries of living in the shadow of major world powers. For a nation that emerged from decades of war and famine to build today's industrial skyline, the ability to escape poverty is a tangible achievement. It represents a right to develop that is often more meaningful to its citizens than the structural aesthetics of Western democracy. Vietnam is moving toward a more efficient, unified stance on the global stage. By centralizing power, the nation is choosing to write its own story, using its own collective will to move past an era of indecision.